and on the same page and in a safe space. Please be aware that this game and the discussion around it includes topics of self-harm, suicide, sexual assault, and childhood abuse. So if at any point you need to remove yourselves or just take a moment, please feel free to do so, and that you are in a safe environment to do that. So to kick us off, would our lovely panelists care to introduce yourselves? Who are you? What do you do? And what drew you to take part in The Quiet Things?
My name's Alyx Jones. I'm the founder of Silverscript Games, and The Quiet Things is also my autobiography, so it's my story. I started making the game after being made redundant in the industry, so that's my full-time job now, which is really awesome. So I'm a bit of everything at the studio.
Hi, I'm Kirsty Gillmore. I'm the voice and casting director and the mocap director for The Quiet Things. And I got involved, I've known Alyx for a long time. And when she knew that there would needed to be a decent amount of dialogue in the game, then she approached me and said, would you consider working on it? And I thought the story was really important. And of course I said yes, fairly obviously.
Hi, I'm Tabbie Lawson, and I'm one of the artists on the game. I've been working with Silverscript Games for 2 years now, and it's my first ever proper position in the games industry, so it's very exciting for me. When we started making it 2 years ago, Alyx reached out on Twitter and needed artists, and I replied with a portfolio, and she said, that's exactly what we need. So I'm here now, and I'm really happy to be involved in such an important topic.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dave Jones, actor, and I play Simon, Alice's father, in the game, and I'm here purely for the money. Yeah, I thought it's a really important game. I've known Alyx for years, and thankfully Kirsty reached out, and I auditioned, obviously, and yeah, that's why I'm here. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you all. And I am your chair and moderator. I'm Elizabeth Plant. By day, I am community manager at a lovely indie studio called Guildford, and by night, I am a professional video game voice actress, so I'm a bit like if Batman could cry on command, but also really love TikTok. So that's me, and I'm here because I love stories, I love truth, and I love the bravery that Alyx and the whole team have on show in developing a story and an experience like this. So, Alyx, would you care to give us a description of what The Quiet Things is and what it explores in your own words?
Yeah, like when I was a student, I really loved playing walking simulator style games, and I know that genre sometimes gets a bit of a bad rap, but I really appreciate games where the exploration and the detail in a story is the focus. So it's a narrative-driven first-person game. You don't see any of the characters, so there's no like graphic violence in the game, but the main story is told through the dialogue. As you walk through and interact with objects, dialogue will play, and you progress through the game as such.
Lovely, thank you. And just to get us into the vibe of it, we are supposedly going to be playing a trailer, which I hope works with a magic click of this button. Yes.
We're just giving you a call as your wife is not doing well. She might not have long left.
Mum, she's at the hospice though. She hasn't gone to a special place, she's just gone. It's just me and you, Wolfie. Dear Diary, my name is Alice.
What I'm about to tell you, I've never told anyone. Things just feel wrong. Everything just gets worse and worse.
It's there to remind you what happens when you disobey me.
Am I bad? Am I evil?
Look at me when I'm speaking to you.
I have to get out of here. If I don't, it will kill me.
Thank you so much for that, Alyx.
Oh, thank you.
I'm getting misty-eyed already, good Lord. So from interviewing you previously, Alyx, everything in The Quiet Things comes from a wealth of documentation and diaries that you've kept onto since childhood, and police reports and all kinds of mental archival stuff. So the game extremely closely reflects what happened in your life. So when it comes to adapting those strands of autobiography, those very literal things that happened, how do you find a balance of what to include, maybe the things that go unsaid, the quieter things, as it were, and how that translates into an interactive gameplay experience?
Yeah, like it's a really funny thing because it covers a 10-year period of my life, which is a lot to cram into kind of 6 hours of gameplay. And memories are kind of a weird thing when you start to try and recall things. Like, it's really hard to know what exactly happened or what you're remembering, or if you're just remembering feelings or facts or what was actually said. And so I leaned on the diary entries that I kept roughly from about the ages of 8 to 18. I also had police records for a lot of this time and social services records. So I did what's called a subject access request. So in the UK, you have freedom of information to some extent to records that have been kept. And so I've got like a big file like this, which is really helpful. And so like the first steps of that is cross-referencing all of these documents and putting together a timeline of everything that happened, and then thinking what's important, because even like when keeping a diary as a teenager, you're probably repeating things in the story, and you don't want the player to then go, well, I've heard this a million times before, like it's not adding anything new to the story. And so you start to curate what content is going in and what's not based on what's effective for the player. So it's not that I'm making anything up or adding anything, but it might be taking things out that aren't important or are being repeated. Yeah,
and I think truth is sort of the central motif there, because that is what we latch onto in stories, is finding things that we as players can resonate with. And so that, what word did you use? Curation process. You don't find that diminishes any of the truth of the experience. You're just sort of streamlining it into something that feels natural, in a sense. Yeah,
like, for example, we have to change all the names of the people because they're real people in real life, and I wouldn't want them to feel misrepresented. And so, for legal reasons and just to protect everybody involved, it's better, even for ourselves, to keep like a little bit of a distance for myself as well. And we talk about it then as like a story. And so that, I don't think we're losing anything. And like even the diary entries are pretty much word for word what I wrote, but obviously with those identifying information changed to not put anyone at risk, or like places, names, times and dates and things like that are relatively changed so that it's not like a legal issue as well.
Yeah, that could be a whole other kettle of fish that we do not want to get into. So in the decision-making process, because you are obviously the studio founder, you do audio, you do gameplay, you do just about everything under the sun, it's a lot to take on, in addition to it being your literal life that you are representing tangibly for essentially the entire world to see and know. So when it comes to making big decisions, do you prefer to do those by yourself, or do you perhaps lean on the rest of the team and say, I want to include this, how do we go about it? Like, what are your thoughts? Or do you sort of keep it close to your chest and say, this is going in, we're removing this?
Yeah, I'm definitely not like an authoritative style of leader anyway, but in terms of the narrative and the story, because it's my story, like you can often get things, I don't know, like Netflix documentaries that perhaps exploit people whose stories are being told, or they lose control over how they're being represented, potentially in a negative way, right? And so for that part of it, it's my voice that's being heard, especially when I was younger, that was not the case. And so being able to feel empowered to then tell my story from my perspective and not have other adults or professionals put a sway on it just because of what they think from themselves. And so the scripts I all write myself, but I do have narrative consultation, and so people have helped from the University of Surrey give feedback about things, for example, like if they're being repeated, or like, is this character actually just doing the same as another character? Maybe we don't need both of those in the story just for like the sake of time. But it's still, like, the whole game is really like raised by a village. It's not just my project, it's everybody here, and so many people outside of that as well who were like Kickstarter backers, supported the project, gave me advice and everything. Like everyone around like the London and Guildford Games community are incredibly supportive. And so while it's my story, it's a game like made by a lot of people and is representative and important to a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all stories, and especially real ones are never made in a vacuum. So that I'd never really considered things like Kickstarter backers being a part of the process, but of course they are. It's knowing that people are behind you and that they want to see this put out into the world. And so I suppose there's a really interesting dramaturgy that unfortunately we don't have time to unpack right now. But maybe in a future panel we can dive into all of that. But thank you, Alyx.
You're welcome.
So much. If we jump over to art with Tabbie. Hello, my darling. So you've been working on the project since essentially day zero, maybe day -1.
Yep.
So are there any insights or experiences that you have as an internal team member that has been so close to the heart of it for so long, and how you manage creating objects from nothing based on Alyx's life, or Alice's, as the character is in the game, and how you manage dealing with quite difficult topics but maintaining your own well-being through that?
Yeah, so when I was given the sort of pitch for the game, it was a demo that Alyx had made back in university, and it was very bare bones. It had the story laid out and all of the levels that we wanted to have planned eventually. But when we came to actually putting in art, we completely changed the engine. So it was in
very helpful.
It was in Unity first, and we brought it into Unreal because we knew that we could light it and make it look really pretty. As for it being autobiographical, the art isn't given power until we apply all of the audio. So there's a sort of disconnect between walking around this environment where there's very mundane objects and then suddenly interacting with these things like the belt on the end of the stairs and having the voice lines come through and explain how they were so significant to the main character during the story. But for me, when I create the art, it doesn't have that power until it's put into the game. So I just see each object as almost like a nude body, for instance, that you just split into its basic shapes and forms, and you create the object and it goes in. And it's not important until you apply the rest of the context to it. So contextually, it matters a lot in the game. I think...
I mean, context is absolutely key, and The Quiet Things, as I understand it, is quite a quintessentially British game, because obviously we're from the UK, we have very British experiences. Sans Kirsty, you're a lovely Kiwi. Technically British, okay. So it is a fully British game. But there's a lot of references and things from particularly 90s childhoods that really set the date and the time and the feel of the game, but that obviously comes with risks, much like guarding people's identities. There's a lot of recognizable branding and things from that era. So are there any things that you've had to sort of model around to try and get that vibe of a 90s UK upbringing, but
yes,
not
there
get
are.
sued?
Yeah, no, we've got loads of references to bands from the 90s, because for you and for the main character, Alice, rock music was really significant to her. Back when she was a teenager, a bit of a rebellious phase.
I might still be in it.
But we had to sort of create parodies of a lot of things, but surrounding the topics that we discuss in the game, which are quite serious, we had to try to make the parodies also a little serious. We found sometimes we'd submit something, like there's references to certain games. We had a Pokemon cartridge that we had to, well, Connor, the other artist, called Fakeamon, but the little character on it was just a little bit too silly, and people were picking it up, and it was kind of taking them out of the environment a little bit, because we don't want people laughing at such a serious topic. And there's other bits like there's a Sony TV that we've called Phony, but we've gone into depth in discussing what's a little bit too silly and what can we put in that makes sense. I think we can get away with stuff legally now, but we're going to discuss back and forth before release with someone who knows more about that.
Yeah, probably wise.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much, Tabbie.
Thank
so now
you.
we'll sort of boomerang a teeny bit between you, Dave, and Kirsty about the acting, recording process. So for me, at least, I view acting as this weird blend of playing pretend and conjuring truth, because that is, as I said earlier, what we attach to as viewers and consumers of media in all forms. But that then becomes doubly poignant when a real-life story enters the equation. So, Dave, you play Alice's father, who is not the ideal father, shall we say. Challenging as a role and as a person, I'm sure. So, as a father yourself, how did you find it preparing for that character and going through that recording process?
Well, it was, thankfully, it was a fairly shortish session because it was mainly for the prototype. There were a few key scenes in there. I mean, as you've seen on the trailer, there's the belt, and with it comes weight. There's a lot of not so much pressure, but there's a lot of the character's challenging in as far as he's not a nice guy. At the same time, it's actually happened. With previous roles that I've done, I've done like autobiographical work before, but not when somebody's been actually sitting in the recording session with you. So there's that added pressure slightly to get it right, but at the same time, I've not had access to the person in order to make sure everything's right, make sure the tone's right, because they were there. I've not been in that position. There's a time when you're about to really hit a child, and I could have put in my head my child there, but that was way too real. Even putting an imaginary child there was absolutely batshit. But it did allow for a certain performance, and thankfully, like I say, I've got Kirsty and Alyx to make sure that tone is right. There's the other part in there that telling your kids that a close family member has passed away. We get the scripts quite early on, so we can prepare for stuff like that. We can, in our heads, get a level of preparation, like for the abuse scene. But for the telling the kids about a family member passing away, I've actually had to do that, and so I didn't even prepare for that. I just knew that I would, for want of a better phrase, use that in the session, and I had no idea how it was going to manifest. But thankfully, again, I had Kirsty and Alyx in order to guide me through that, make sure it was real to a degree, and that was a really tough session, yeah.
So I suppose the converse side of preparation is debriefing and dealing with getting quite pent up through recordings, because they're a very physical thing. I think not a lot of people actually realize about voice acting is how much physicality is actually involved, because you have to work twice as hard to get the emotion out through just your voice alone, and that can have a really profound impact on you. So were there any things that you did following that recording session to just get your mind right?
I probably could have handled it better than I did. During the performance, Kirsty was constantly checking in, which was absolutely excellent and exactly what you should be doing. When the session ended, everybody was really quiet, saying like, "Are you all right, Dave?" It's like, yeah, I'm fine. Just like slowly staggered out of the room into the studio, and was gonna like sit down for like say 10-15 minutes, just decompress. But it was a glorious day outside, and I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna walk, get some fresh air, got my earpods in, just walk to the station, and that's what I did. And I saw Kirsty a week later at a social, and she said, "Hi, how you doing? You all right?" I went, "Yeah, not too bad." She said, "Yeah, long time no see." I went, "Well, yeah, no, it actually has been a while." And Kirsty said, "Well, no, it was only last week." And it hit me like a freight train. I just completely forgotten about it all. And I was just stood there, just like a rabbit in headlights for a little bit. I wasn't really even in the room. And yeah, I had to actually take probably a good 30 seconds to actually chill there. So yeah, that wasn't phenomenal in a way of coping with it. But thankfully, there are going to be some strategies in place for, not even future, but current sessions that are going on.
That was an artful segue. Thank you, Dave. Kirsty, can you, before we get on to that lovely part, can you tell us about your process for working through scripts and recording sessions as a director, and perhaps if your approach differs when dealing with autobiographical material?
I think as the voice and casting director, I'm in charge of finding the actors, casting the actors, obviously along with Alyx, and then directing them in the sessions for every session that we do. And the majority of games that I've done in the past have often, as for a lot of games, had very fantastical elements. And when it came to the quiet things, one thing that I was really, really aware of is that we're not just talking about real people, because a lot of games have very real people in it, but actually existing people who are out in the world today, existing, going about their lives. And that felt like an additional weight about making the performances as truthful as we can. And it's a word that gets bandied around a lot with acting, truthful. But for me, for this, it meant really portraying the characters as three-dimensional and as real human beings with all the flaws. We have some very challenging characters in the game, including the character of Simon that Dave plays. We have sexual abusers. We have people who make very poor decisions, and I needed actors to be able to portray these as realistically as possible, but also be really, really clear about who they were dealing with from the start. So I think that one of the things that I really took on board with this game particularly is being very, very open from the start about exactly who these characters were right from the casting stage, so that nobody was coming in with, surprise, now we're doing a sexual abuse scene. That's not the sort of surprise that I would ever want to. I never want to make an actor feel unsafe in any kind of a way, and emotional safety was really, really important to us from the start. And we just, right from the start of the process, we spent a lot of time thinking about how natural the characters sounded, how we took a really naturalistic approach to the acting. So we didn't want it to be heightened, we didn't want it to be over the top in any kind of a way. And in the recording sessions themselves, I was just really, really aware, and we did this all the way through, to really separate the story of Alyx, the person, from the story of Alice, the character, which I definitely got that mixed up enough times because Alyx and Alice are very similar names. But it meant that I was never saying, I tried not to, as much as possible, not to say to Alyx what happened at this point, but what is happening to Alice at this point. What is Alice going through? So that you could have some distance from it and we could keep that kind of emotional safety. Which I think was really important because Alice's story, as well as Alyx's story, goes through a lot of very, very challenging themes, some of which are listed in the content warning, and there's more. And I also included all of those on every single casting I did. I had a very large content warning on every casting that was really, really clear about if you are auditioning for this role, not only will your character cover some of these and you will come into contact, but the game as a whole covers these. So you need to be really clear about what you're doing. And that meant that some people weren't interested, some agents weren't interested in dealing with the topic, they didn't want anything to do with it. But that's fine, that's okay, yeah.
Yeah, achieving and enforcing boundaries is so important in any mode of storytelling, especially one like this that can be quite charged, because even if, Alyx, say you've healed quite gracefully from all this experience, a lot of actors might really not feel that way, and it can open a lot of scars for them. Like, you never know what's going to happen when you get into that booth or when you read that script. So as the game expanded and you added more dialogue and recorded more sessions, you guys actually brought on well-being facilitators to come and sit in with those sessions and ensure that everybody was able to advocate for their own well-being and to check in with each other. So can you, I suppose, elaborate on what that process was like once you added that into what you were already doing?
Alyx can probably speak to how we found why we decided to get a well-being facilitator, because it was something that we discussed after the first sessions.
Yeah, I did particularly feel bad for Dave because I lived through it, but you don't always realise what that's like for someone outside of that. And because for me, I was like, well, that's not even the worst thing that's happened to me, so it's not that bad. And then I'm like, no, it is that bad. And for someone to put themselves in that situation, then not have that safeguard for them, made me really think. And I'm sorry.
Oh no, you no need to apologise at all. It was like I say, it's there's been a lot of learnings in this project anyway, and it's been a gift in that respect, seeing as though it's been able to be rolled out for everyone else. So yeah.
But yeah, so the fundamental problem is there's no kind of standard for anything like that in the games industry, and we're a really small indie team, and at the time we were just making a prototype on a small budget, and I worked in a voiceover studio for 5 years, and I never ever saw a wellbeing facilitator or even an intimacy coordinator, like nothing. It was always just engineer, director, actor. And so when we started thinking about that afterwards, I was like, what should be here? And so I found a company called 6 Foot from the Spotlight, who traditionally work with film, TV, and theatre productions. And they have a role called a wellbeing facilitator, who's generally there to look after everybody involved in the production. And that's not just the actors, that's the engineer, the director, myself, like anyone who's touching that session. Because ultimately, like even the engineer, they didn't really have a choice. It's their job to sit there and then be exposed to that content.
And hear it over and over and over again.
Yeah, right. And so we brought them in once we raised some more money for the game. And so all the recording sessions we've done for the full game after the prototype, they've been present for every single session. So I'm really happy with that.
Yeah, and we were really lucky. We worked with 2 wellbeing facilitators, and our second one, Alyx, very confusing as well. She's also an intimacy coordinator, an intimacy director. So we had her on our mocap shoots as well, which was really great.
Oh, she's fantastic.
Yeah, she's really great. Wellbeing facilitators, for those people who don't know, are trained in mental health first aid, and they're there to support the emotional and mental health of anybody in a production. And we, as far as we know, we're the first game we've heard of to actually employ one.
Yeah, I don't know of any.
Yeah, I've definitely had nobody tell us otherwise. So, but it's for a game, not just an autobiographical game, but a game with challenging themes. It's just been really key because, as you said, Liz, you've no idea how people are going to react in the moment. And you said that as well, Dave. You didn't know necessarily what was going to come out. And I have no, so I'm a professional performance director in games, but obviously there's a lot of people who direct content in games who might be just another role that you do. You might be the writer or the narrative designer or the sound designer or the dialogue engineer or what have you. But when you are directing actors, when you are in the room, in the booth, you are or in the studio with the booth, you are responsible for. You are holding the space, the emotional space for your actors and everybody else in the room. So you are the one who everybody will turn to, and everybody will want to reassurance. I'm a really big advocate, as I've said, for making sure my actors are safe. Emotionally safe, physically safe, and I have a lot of experience. However, I am also having to do the job of a director. And when I have an actor, when we are faced with very challenging themes and you don't know how people are going to react in the moment, even giving them the scripts in advance, even telling them, even giving them as much information as possible, you don't know how they're going to react. And I am not a mental health professional. And having somebody there who knows how to deal with those situations and can support the actors, but also me with everything, and like you say, the engineer, and someone who can give us tools and techniques and check in and check out. But it was also there to be able to say, to just as a backup, as a safety net. They were our safety net. And I think it's something that, particularly with this game, that I found really personally didn't really cross my mind until I was doing it, is that because we were recording, as you often do with games, we were recording actors one at a time, it meant that I was reading in a lot of the lines for the actors. Now, I've done that a lot in the past, that's fine. But when you're talking about scenes like a suicide attempt, and I'm reading those lines into the actors, and then we have an entire half day, and then I do the same thing again in the afternoon for the other half of that conversation with a different actor, that's a lot. And I didn't really realize how much of an emotional toll that was going to take on me, let alone our engineer, Alyx, who was in the room, our actors as well. So having a well-being facilitator who I could go and say, hey, look, can you give me how should I cope with this? What do you recommend? And to give us tools and techniques, I think was really useful. And to have them before and after, because they were there. They were available before and after, weren't they?
Yeah, that support before you go into a session, knowing that someone's going to be there, you can flag any issues before you're in. And then afterwards, I think that time to process it is the worst time. Like during the session, maybe you'll be impacted, but usually you're just in the zone. Like I'm sure the same for you. You're just focusing on the script. Is this take right? How's the time doing? All of those things. But then afterwards, when you step out into a lovely day and you're like, oh.
Yeah. And I think having that person there actually really, I don't know how you feel about this, but really helped think about how the wider team were feeling as well.
I think, like anything, it's that thoughtfulness and being careful with what you're doing and always considering those points of view. And it helps having someone there because it just adds that level of looking at everyone and how they're responding to things and just trying to safeguard them. Not that I wouldn't have thought about it before, but it adds the level of this is a job role now and it's important.
Yeah.
Lovely. God, what a wonderful discussion that turned into. Thank you so much for your insights. Dave, it's time for the foreshadowed boomerang, but for your prototype sessions, as Kirsty said, you didn't have that facilitation, but in your upcoming sessions you will. So do you have any insights or hopes for how that will now be for you in taking on this role?
Yeah, I think one of the main things is that seeing as though we get the scripts in advance, there are some studios that don't give the scripts out in advance because they like not even a cold read, they love a sight read to get an instinctual performance from an actor. But when it's something like this, that's incredibly dangerous. So we get the scripts in advance, and basically I'll now be able to look through it, potentially spot any flash points which may occur, and if I think that they may be an issue, I'll be able to flag it with the wellness coordinator. Or not even flag it, but just reach out and see if there's anything that they can do to mitigate a potential, what would you say, an episode, a particular episode during a session or even after a session. And then conversely, after the session, just debrief with them, take like 15 minutes, half an hour. It could be extremely important and helpful for your mental health, just to not like I did, put it in a drawer and just forget about it, because you never know when that's just going to come and slap you in the face again.
Hopefully not a literal slap. That would be quite rough, you would think.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, potentially. So as a bit of a closing statement, do each of you have, say, a golden kernel of advice for whichever discipline you represent? If a studio would like to tackle an autobiographical story, but they don't know where to start, whether that be through gameplay or what to adapt or how to adapt it, how to perform it, do you have anything that you would care to offer up?
I think as a creator, it's interesting because there's not much autobiographical work in games at the moment, and that's quite an interesting area that I hope maybe through making this it inspires more people to be able to tell their stories, because I think, like, we had a comment that someone said the game wasn't fun, and it's like, games don't have to be fun. Like, no one would say that about a film or a TV show, like, oh, this wasn't fun, there's not balloons popping around everywhere or something. And it's like, video games, I think, are such a platform for empathy, because you literally are interacting with something and putting yourself through those environments. You're not just passively watching. And so being able to use that in a positive way to show other people what experience is like, or tell different kinds of stories, they have even more power to potentially change society in that way. So I'm hopeful that that becomes more of a thing, like real stories and documentary work in games, because I think it's really interesting, and it adds a layer of kind of engagement and depth when you're playing it, to know that it's something that someone's experienced and you can have it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the very literal putting yourself in someone's shoes, and with The Quiet Things, you've described it previously as quite similar to Dear Esther and That Dragon Cancer. But with this, there's no real gameplay elements beyond walking around, interacting with objects, and making memories tangible through those interactions. And it's all very accessible, and people can take it at their own pace, as opposed to a movie, which, if it all suddenly becomes too much, it keeps playing no matter what. So with The Quiet Things, you can really sit in that and absorb and feel.
Yeah, and the additional thing to that is the player has autonomy and agency over the pace that they take through the game, and even basic things like content warnings. In film and TV, it's just a sort of text box that you get, whereas in games you can make that personalized to the player as well. And so all those things are really helpful ways to be able to engage with content with your own choice, basically, at the heart of it. But games can be art, they can be powerful, they can be emotive, and that's not a bad thing.
Absolutely, thank you. Kirsty?
I would say be very clear about the story that you're telling, because it is still a story, even if it's an autobiographical story. It is still a narrative. Be really clear about what you want to tell and why you want to tell it. Alyx hasn't included absolutely everything that happened in her life.
That would take a long time.
Yeah, that would take a really long time, because it wasn't necessary. And everything that is included for a very good reason. So be really clear about the story you want to tell, and be really mindful about how you tell it. This is the most, in terms of the themes of the game, this is the most challenging game I've ever worked on, and I've worked on extremely large games like Baldur's Gate 3, which have a lot of themes. I've worked on much smaller games and everything in between. But I would, because I do a lot of having to explain to people why the game is, why we have these scenes, and why we're including all of this. And I think it's being really important from the start to go, if I am what story am I trying to tell, and being mindful of what I'm saying and how I'm going to say it. Think of right from the start. Like, if you are going to include dialogue and actors, how am I going to protect them? How am I going to protect members of my team if we are including challenging themes, which a lot of life stories do have? It's a reason why a lot of people want to tell autobiographical stories in any form, because they feel that they've got an important story to share. And I think if it is important, and if there are themes in it that people are going to find distressing, then thinking about how you're going to portray it and how you're going to protect your team. Because it's not just, I deal with just obviously with the dialogue and also the mocap, but also you've got artists who are potentially dealing with very challenging themes through their work every day. How are they going to be protected? Writers. You're doing the writing in this, but there could be, sifting through lots of diary entries where you're talking about very poignant stuff must be challenging for you.
Yeah, but even from a basic perspective, if you don't have a budget for private healthcare and wellbeing facilitators, you can still be mindful about telling someone the content that they can have a choice. Am I going to do it today? No, I'm feeling quite tired and not in a mental place to do it. So it's that choice and thoughtfulness behind everything that you do, which I think you amplify as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, giving everybody choice, I think, was something that keeps coming up, making sure that everybody can choose to whether to interact with certain topics or not. And you've definitely had team members who've said, no, that's not necessarily for me.
I'm glad that they felt safe and comfortable to be able to do that, rather than pushing through for the sake of this is a job that I really need to do and I need to keep everyone happy, to be able to say, actually, I can't do that. But that's great.
Yeah, and trying to figure out as a team right from the start, how do we deal with that if we want to tell the story and there are people who are uncomfortable about dealing with these themes, then how do we approach that? Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Tabitha.
Yeah, when it comes down to the artwork, a lot of the stuff later on in the game is quite abstract. So it's more about, for us, sending the right message and communicating with the team. Make sure that it's tasteful and the exact sort of thing we want to say with our artwork. And it was like Kirsty was saying as well, make sure that you're warning your artists of what they might be getting into. I remember when I was at university, one of our lecturers was telling us about how they had to reference some quite awful images just to be able to get some more gory stuff into their game. Our game is not like that. It's like I said before, mundane objects in the environment, and it's the audio that brings them to life. And the way that we explore mental health through the artwork is very abstract, and it's more about emotion than it is about. It's like show, don't tell when it comes to the artwork. And I think show, don't tell can be applied to anything, but especially in an autobiographical game. You want to really get the emotion in there. And art is such a powerful medium to do that in. I think that's all it comes down to for the art, really.
Absolutely, thank you. And Dave?
I think, obviously, be true to yourself, look after yourself, know your limitations, and don't rely on the people in the room with you, but don't be afraid to lean on them. Ask them whenever you think there may be an issue. There's no stupid questions. And thankfully, seeing as though Kirsty and Alyx have made the studio space an incredibly safe place, you don't feel afraid to ask, and that's key in delivering a truthful performance. And yeah, I'm just very thankful that Kirsty's in this, because they're incredibly empathetic and but thankfully she's known me for quite some time anyway, so there's a level of bonding there that we know that we can ask each other and how far we can push each other. But even if you don't be afraid to ask for help and ask questions to retain that truth and the tone. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. Can we get a small hand for our wonderful panelists, please?
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. So we have about 5 to 10 minutes for a Q&A, if anybody would care to offer up any questions they have for us. If not, it is almost lunch.
Yep. Got a few.
Hi. Sorry. So, congratulations on making a game that is dealing with such difficult topics. Definitely not an easy thing to do. I'm also a game developer myself, so I just want to kind of know in the acting department, when it comes to dealing with such heavy topics such as this one, is there a significant difference between just recording on a microphone in a booth and between actual performance capture, between multiple actors doing motion capture, stuff like that?
Ooh, coming in with the small, short question there. It's okay, it's fine. I mean, the biggest difference for this game compared to other games that I've worked on as a director, like a lot of indie games, we didn't have the budget to do full performance capture. We have done some mocap in the game, but it wasn't voiced, so it's just mocap some of the actions for the scenes. I think if you have two actors being able to react with each other, whether you're doing that in a voice booth or whether you're doing that on a PCAP stage in a volume, you will see a difference in the dynamic. And we do have some parts of the game which we were able to record two actors at the same time. There are therapy sessions where we have both the lead actor who plays Alyx and the actor who plays the therapist recording at the same time. And that, I don't want to say it gives a better dynamic because that's not a very useful word, but it will give you a different dynamic. And I would say if you do have the budget and the availability of your actors, it might be something that you wanted to explore. If you do have it's nice to be able to have them to play off each other for those intimate conversations. I would be aware that if you're recording actors by themselves, then a lot of actors, not all, but a lot of actors would like lines to play off of. So that means you'll probably be reading in, or if you've already recorded the actors and you have the technology to do so, playing those lines in for the actors to react to. So that's just a different approach. You do the best you can with the facilities you have, and I guess it makes a difference because I'm a very experienced director. I know how to handle those kind of situations. I would say for people who are working with actors maybe for the first time, then you might, if you can record actors together, then it might be like a really good way to ease you into it and to take the pressure off yourself as well. But it's just a different dynamic. You will get a different dynamic if you're recording actors together in the same space rather than actors separately. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, and also when you've got booth versus PCAP stage or volume, you've still got physicality involved in order to make the sound. There's a very different sound for if you're going to be hitting someone just being completely static and actually involving movement. And so, yeah, acting is acting. There's no real. Again, acting is also reacting. So yeah, when you've got another person to read in, that will obviously change as well, the dynamic. But yeah, everything is going to be a truthful performance, regardless of where you are.
Do you have plans to localize the game in other languages?
We do, we're just poor indies. But no, I think it's really important. Like, people ask us for it quite often. It's purely a budget thing, but I think the topics in the game are applicable across the world. Just because it's based in the UK, I think there's a real problem as society globally that we're just not talking about these things enough. And the more people it can reach that might help that, the more I'd be happy with the kind of result. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, I have a question regarding the voice sessions. So particularly given like the very sort of sensitive and intense content, and I guess the fact that you had the scripts in advance, did you also find during the sessions that there were certain times where it made more sense to maybe change something because during the session you realized it wasn't capturing exactly what you were trying to capture, or did you find the best option was to stay with the script as it was, what everyone knew was happening? Yeah.
Yeah, we had a very organic process in recording. Alyx and I worked, you know, we had a lot of back and forth during the sessions. It felt sometimes it didn't quite sit right. And Alyx always allowed the freedom for us to change things. We never any story beats, like we're not changing the story, but some lines we changed. Also, some of the actors we cast, something sounded better in their own accents. We have Welsh actors in the game, and a couple of the actors who are Welsh speaking as well. So a couple of the times we put in Welsh, they said, "Oh, in Welsh we would say this. Can I add this? Because that would, I feel the character would say that." And we were like, "Yeah, we feel that would be appropriate," which is great. I don't speak Welsh, so we allowed that. I think we probably in your session as well, Dave. I did think there were definitely a couple of things. A lot of the time, what I was after was the truth of intention. So I never want to feel. I have worked on games where people are really married to the text, but if you are going to involve actors in a game, then you do have to allow them agency because you've cast them in that role for a reason. So I think once an actor really connects with the character, if they capture the truth of the intention, if it's really clear what they're trying to express, but the words are slightly different, I think that's fine. And I was lucky enough to have the writer, Alyx, in the session, so we could have that back and forth. Very occasionally there was a specific reason why you were like, no, I really want it to say like this, and that's absolutely fine. Yeah.
I think it's like, I'm not rewriting scenes or adding something that an actor wouldn't be expecting, but everything around the game is really collaborative, so I'm very open to like feedback and input to some extent. Obviously not hour-long discussion about things, but it's a thing of like, it's not that hard to get an extra take with that feedback anyway. You can always make a decision later about whether you use it or not in context with all the other lines. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, first off. So with these sort of difficult stories, I guess it seems like sometimes the people closest to us who might be in the best position to prevent harm, they're also part of the story sort of implicitly. And I know you talked about anonymizing and changing names and things like that, but I'm curious about what the reception has been from people who maybe were more privy to your experiences. Were there difficult conversations along the way? Were there people who tried to suppress the story? Anything like that?
Yeah, like some of the people involved I have spoken to talk about it if we have a good relationship. There's others who obviously don't have a good relationship with, and as far as I'm concerned, it's not their business what I do with my life, because technically it's not them, it's based on a true story. So there's no like legal back and forth there. I think people are concerned in, especially like there's themes that take place in like schools and colleges, like how those institutes would be represented. And so having those conversations with the people that worked there to realize that it's just telling a true story and it's like based in time, and it's not, I'm not like out to get people, if that makes sense. I just want to show like how things are and how they should change. Things like social services are represented badly, and so that's also true though, and there's a lot of records to back that up, so it's not like, I don't know, there's a lot of difficult things around that, but I think if we don't talk about it, then it's not going to change. And so I personally, like, come for me. I don't care. It's important to talk about it.
I think it's an interesting topic, then something that we were talking about yesterday, in that there are a lot of people. I asked Alyx how you feel about the fact that a lot of people, not just strangers and the audience, know your personal story, but a lot of your friends and a lot of your colleagues now know your personal story. And it really only hit me relatively recently. I'm like, wow, I know a lot about Alyx now. Like, I've known Alyx for a long time, but I now know a lot about you because I now know your entire story. And I think the impact of that on like a creative and autobiographical story is quite interesting.
It's a weird thing because there's a lot that happened to me in like a long period of time, and while I'll speak to people about various elements of it, no one necessarily knows the whole story of what happened. And so, like, yes, it's weird putting yourself out there, but I feel like there's so much good that can come of it. It's worth it, even though it's difficult.
Yeah, I actually think, like, in that respect, it's not only the story in the game, but actually the production of it that's actually very important for other indie devs and, well, basically just the industry in general. I think every aspect of it is incredibly important. So I'm blown away to be part of this.
Thank you.
Right, and that has us just about at time. So thank you all so much again for coming. And thank you all for being yourselves.
Lunch.
Now it's time for lunch. Thank you.